Today, I am going to present a paper entitled Vedic Wisdom and the Modern World, an Inquisitive Glance into the Rigveda. Acts as the central core of Indian culture. Moral and social values have been imparted by the Vedic wisdom. The Vedas recognize most of the values of life. In them, truth has been described as the essence of divinity. Vedic literature was designed and classified in such a manner so as to serve the different aims of life of human beings, purusharthas, with different desires and capacities, arthitva and samartha, according to fitness, adhikara, at different stages of their life, ashramas. This literature is the source and instrument of the man's moral redemption. The Vedas emphasize the aspect of the prayer ritual karma and secular values of Abhyudaya, while the Upanishads shift the emphasis to that of mysticism knowledge, that is jnana, and spiritual values, nihsreyash, devotion, meditation, upasana being common to both, which links up the two. There is therefore no real conflict between the Vedas and the Upanishads, the latter being the culmination of what has been imparted in the former. The Vedas are the oldest bulk of literature that man has ever produced. They have a message to give to humanity. Truly speaking, they are the zenith of human wisdom. They can save man from utter untruth, gross materialism, from violence, and can teach man tolerance and harmony that are necessary more than any other literature, and that sense of world unity on which rests the moral order of the universe, that is Rita. They have imparted moral and social values as well. The Rigveda, however, represents a great synthesis, the philosophical as well as spiritual, and the mystical as well as practical expression. It contains the universal ideals of Indian culture, the aspirations as proposed by this culture and acceptable to the entire mankind can be well expressed by this single saying from the Upanishad, Ekam sad vipra bahudha vadanti, which means that which is one. Wise men speak of it in many ways. In the Vedas are embedded all values of life. In them, truth has been described as the essence of divinity. The Vedas are the source and instrument of man's moral salvation. With the help of this, can be given that faith in the oneness with God, so essential for saving mankind from the gross materialism prevalent in the modern day. To give value and meaning to life, we should steadily pursue a purpose, ignoring the obstacles that hinder its growth. Chance provides the occasions for the application of these values, while the individual mind adds qualities like meaning, purpose, and interest to events. In the silent hours of self-communion, we strive to free ourselves from worldly chores suffocating our soul. We try to cleanse our thoughts and create within ourselves a clean heart and a single mind. It helps us to collect our thoughts and reassemble personality. In the state of complete self-communion, one finds oneself in that silence when one can hear the cry of the finite for the infinite. When all our actions are elevated by a moral purpose, we acquire a broad vision the spirit of tolerance, harmony, and goodwill. The life which is disciplined by the moral values becomes a beautiful piece of art. The Vedic sages who had their spiritual visions also gloried in the beautiful physical visions of the world. And they prayed for a full, rich, and happy life, strong in body, mind, and spirit. The Rigvedic stanza 191:20 describes the ideal citizen as one who is fit for work, able in affairs, that is karmanya, skillful in domestic concerns, sadhanya, fit for the religious assembly, assiduous in worship, vidathya, and fit for the political council, eminent in society, sabhya. In the Vedas, however, the existence of evil was believed not to be a result of past actions, but to be an impediment that had to be bravely resisted and overcome both within and without us. Indra's destruction of Britra, the power of darkness and evil opposed to Rita, is indicative of the final triumph of goodness and law over evil and disorder. To recall what Swami Vivekananda once said, I cannot account for the existence of evil by any rational method. To want to do so is to be co-equal with God. I call God long-suffering and patient precisely because he permits evil in the world. I know that he has no evil in himself. And yet, if there is evil, he is the author of it and yet untouched by it. Unquote. Every man has his own britra to fight, and he can fight him successfully only if he is valiant enough. In the Rigveda, the sinless, that is anaga, devas, are described as Rita Sapaha, followers of Rita, and Satyaha. And sinners, Papasaha, are spoken as Anritaha, that is, they are without Rita, and Asatya, without Satya and truth. Thus, the Vedic outlook is the heroic or epic outlook on life. Life is hard and there is evil in our midst, but victory is ours. If we be brave, tolerant, and believers in harmony, man must be judged not by what he says, but what he does. There should be toleration for all honest views and actions. The dictates of one's own conscience should be the guide in one's religious and moral activities. Now I quote Professor Radhakrishnan, the great thinker and philosopher of India. Out of the confusion around us, we have to devise a destiny and make it manifest through all the twists and turns of accident. Otherwise, life becomes a meaningless succession of irrelevant episodes unconnected with any specific purpose, springing from nothing and returning to nothing. To give a life of responsibility, individual life should be guided by self-respecting and self-restraining efforts. The very first mantra of the Ishopanishad reminds us of the ageless truth that says, by giving up the lure of life alone, can we enjoy it? Teno takteno bhunjitaha. The one and only way to improve mankind is to show the way by one's own example. This was seen clearly by the seers of our land. Man cannot escape from work, hoping thereby to get away from worldly attachment. Life is not possible for an individual or for a collection of individuals without real hard work. If we do not work for ourselves, then we have to leave on others who do. But ultimately, it is always better so to work as gradually to free oneself and not so as to get further entangled. The Ishopanishad again laid it down by saying, by constantly doing what ought to be done and thus aspiring to live 100 years. Kurban nebeha karmani jiji vishet chatang samaha ebang tai nannathe tosti na karma lipyate nare. Which means instead by doing duty only should there be the wish to live here for 100 years. For a human being like you, there is no existence other than this by which karma does not cling to you. Swamiji, again, I am quoting from Swamiji, Swami Vivekanand. I quote, it is the worker who is attached to results that grumbles about the nature of the duty which has fallen to his lot. To the unattached worker, all duties are equally good. We are all apt to think too highly of ourselves. Our duties are determined by our desires to a much larger extent than we are willing to grant. Competition rouses envy and it kills the kindliness of the heart. To the grumbler, all duties are distasteful. Nothing will ever satisfy him, and his whole life is doomed to prove a failure. Let us work on, doing as we go whatever happens to be our duty, and being ever ready to put our shoulders to the wheel. Then surely shall we see the light. Indian culture, I unquote. Indian culture speaks of highest self-respect and restraint of one's desires, fulfillment of desires by sacrificing sheer worldly enjoyment. In the Vedas, truth has been described as the essence of divinity. They recognize most of the values of life. Rigveda 8:57-2 says, the 3 and 30 deities, the manifestations of truth, saw you two Ashwins approach truth. It is important to note that the Vedas place truth first and ritual next in religion. Rita, the moral order, is wider than truth. It includes justice and goodness. It is for this reason that the Vedic gods upholding the Rita are all lawful, beautiful, and good. The Vedic hymns express a high quality of religious feeling on the part of their composer rishis. They contain the rudiments of a far higher species of thought than these early poets could have dreamed of. By revealing the beauty that lies at the core of the cosmic order, the Vedic sages uplifted the mind of man to unimaginable heights. The beauty of Ushas illustrates the highest refinement of the mind and the finest culture. The deity Sabitar is understood in terms of goodness, beauty, and truth, the 3 ultimate values. Vedic outlook is the heroic of epic outlook on life. Life is hard and there is evil in our midst, but victory is ours. Modern life has not simplified, but multiplied desires. And with that multiplication of greed and anger that are associated with those desires has become varied and intensified. Desires are multiplied when being devoid of a sense of spiritual values. We do not develop the inner ear for listening to the voice of conscience. This sense of spiritual values has taken the shape of civilization. India is the land of an ancient, imperishable culture, which has given us ageless vitality. If India of today is recognized as representing certain moral and spiritual values in the affairs of the world, it is because of it. All civilizations are rooted in religion. Our forefathers and forefathers of all the great nations of the world drew strength from the contemplation and worship of some supreme force. That faith behind it was the source of power to withstand false desires and passions and to maintain high ideals of conduct. All history proves this. Moral teachings that enjoy the sanction of good conduct can achieve the purpose of acquiring momentum. Human nature being ordinarily egoistic, some sort of sanction is necessary to restrict or regulate the selfish tendencies of the individual. The sanctions are provided by social opinion and conscience molded by education, religious mindedness, tradition, and self-restraints. The great scriptures of our country emphasize over and over self-restraint by way of bringing toleration and harmony in building character. The greater the restraint we impose on ourselves, the better for our culture. That is why our traditions can come to stand so long without breaking down. We may lose ourselves in admiration over modern discovery and knowledge. But I would like you to remember that our ancestors, the seers, have not been excelled by anybody else in the world at any stage of history in their perfect balance of mind, sanity, and pure vision. We cannot but be astonished by the broad views developed by our ancestors, the seers and the writers of our scriptures. The Upanishads do not preach philosophy of pessimism or the unnatural and impossible doctrine of inaction. They stand for a philosophy of life, which instead of preaching mechanical renunciation of the material world by souls frustrated in their career, give a call for a life of positive joy, that is ananda, which cannot be snatched away by the passing breath of pain or pleasure. The Vedas are positive in their acceptance of life and death and life's struggles and imperfections. Positive too in their acceptance of the ultimate values of truth, goodness, beauty, eternal law, and the ultimate reality, that is Sat. According to Tagore, Rabindra Tagore, not for me salvation in renunciation. Let me utter the message conveyed or show the light shade upon the path to be trodden in passages from the Upanishads. Satyan na pramaditavyam, dharman na pramaditavyam, kushalan na pramaditavyam, swadhyaya pravachanabhyam na pramaditavyam. Swerves not from truth, dharma, prudence, self-protection, and the path of worldly prosperity. Swerve not also from constant reading and teaching. Sahana bhavatu, sahanau bhunaktu, sahaviryam karvavahai, Tvejasvinavadhitomastu, ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May we be supported and cherished, and may we obtain sustenance in comradeship and be full of courage. May our studies be fruitful, and may there be no hatred. Now, to conclude, the future is with the young. To them must be brought the creative power of spiritual life in a way that their immature minds can understand. Through joyful collective action, their growing urges should be harnessed to noble reasons. We should therefore think in terms of youth movement based on faith in defense of spiritual values. The minds of youth should be harmonized to develop those moral qualities and that faith in God, without which man can never fulfill his higher mission in life. We should remember that we should be the instruments of God. However, to be an instrument of God, to live in Him, to listen to and obey His mandate is not by any means easy. Thus, we must learn to stand up every time we stumble. Every little effort goes a great way. Further, I would like to conclude by reciting this unique Upanishadic Shanti mantra from the Ishopanishad. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. So thank you all Thanks for the patient hearing. Thank you.